Hey, I've got a couple of riddles for you today, but those are hard, so start your brain engine and let's go. There was once a magical forest inhabited by elves and gnomes. Since they didn't get along very well, they lived in two different parts of the forest to avoid all conflict. One day, centaurs invaded the forest and elves and gnomes were forced out, running in different directions. Let's follow a small group of 6 creatures, 3 elves and 3 gnomes. They ran west, but unfortunately, they stumbled across a lake. None of them could swim, but luckily, there was a raft. The raft could only carry 2 creatures at once, 2 elves, 2 gnomes, or 1 elf and 1 gnome. So you need to figure out a way for all of them to cross the lake safely. Now, here's the problem. If there are more gnomes on one side than elves, they will attack them. Even if an elf is on the raft, but not in the part of the lake where there are more gnomes than elves, it's still not safe. Can you figure out a way for them all to cross the lake safely? Okay, so here are 5 possible first steps. 1 elf crosses the lake, or 1 gnome, or 2 elves, 2 gnomes, or 1 elf and 1 gnome. But it doesn't make any sense to cross the lake alone since they need to send the raft back somehow. So those 2 options are out. 2 elves can't cross the lake together because then the 3rd elf will be left alone with 3 gnomes and they will attack him. So it's either 2 gnomes crossing the lake first or an elf and a gnome. So let's go with the 2 gnomes. So 2 of them cross the lake and of course 1 of them has to come back. Now what? 2 elves can't leave together because the 3rd one is in danger. If an elf and a gnome leave together, then the one who is leaving will be in danger as soon as they cross the river. So 2 more gnomes leave together, and then 1 comes back. An elf and a gnome can't leave together because then there will be 3 gnomes and 1 elf on the other side. So this time, 2 elves cross the lake together. Who comes back? Not an elf, because the other one can't be left alone there. A gnome can't go back alone. Otherwise, there will be 2 gnomes and 1 elf on the first shore. So, a plot twist. An elf and a gnome come back together. Now, 2 gnomes can't cross the lake. An elf and a gnome can't go either. So, the 2 remaining elves go to the other shore together. None of them can now return since there are 2 gnomes left on that shore. So, a gnome will return to pick up one of his buddies. Then another gnome will go to pick up the last gnome. But it's not the only solution. You could also succeed by sending a gnome and an elf together as a first move. Here's a graph of how it would play out. But remember, no matter how far you travel, there's no place like gnome. Okay, great job! Now it's time for the second riddle, and this one comes from Esme. This girl often goes for a walk in a forest and typically gets lost. This time, though, she doesn't get lost. Here's her way home, but she's tempted to go visit her old friend, a witch, who lives in that forest. Esme has an amazing riddle, and it's pretty hard, so she thinks she has a good chance of winning the witch's cat. So, Esme goes to the witch's house and offers the following. I bet you can't solve my riddle. If I'm right, your cat will go home with me. The witch believes she can solve any riddle, so she takes that risk. Esme puts a big acute triangle on the table. Here, you can make 7 cuts to make this triangle disappear. Every piece you cut off that is an acute triangle will disappear. But if a triangle has an angle that is right or obtuse, that piece will stay. Once again, 7 cuts, and you have to make the whole triangle disappear. Not a single smallest piece can be left. So, how can the witch do that and keep her cat? Whenever you make a cut, it'll either produce 2 right angles or an acute and obtuse angle. The witch seems to be doomed, but then she looks at the pizza she hasn't finished. When you cut into more than 4 pieces, all angles are acute. The problem is that a pizza is round, and we're dealing with a triangle. Still, the trick also works with other shapes, like hexagons and pentagons. Good for the witch, she can make a pentagon out of this acute triangle by making just 2 cuts. The small cut-off triangles are acute, and they disappear. Now, the witch needs to deal with the pentagon like she does with a pizza. Cut it into 5 pieces using the last 5 cuts. That's a success story. Hey, we know you like the cat, Esme, but maybe get one of your own. Okay, do you think you can crack another one? I promise it's the last one for today, and it's quite fun. No more geometry. Here's how the story goes. 1,000 years ago, 6 siblings founded a magical school. Ingram, Regalia, and Corona are witches, and Agnard, Ardumo, and Modnar are wizards. A pair of siblings found a house each, and the names of those houses are Rymeth, Madlo, and Damora. All 6 of them also founded the 4th house, named after their 7th sibling who went missing when they were young. You are invited to study in the magical school, but as you arrive, you have to be sorted into your house. You have to put your hand on the sorting book and wait for its decision to light up on the cover. When you do it, the book sees potential in you. So instead of sorting you into one of the 3 houses right away, it gives you an opportunity to get into the 4th house, where the most gifted young magicians go. To prove that you're good enough to be sorted into that house, you have to solve the sorting riddle. The task is to guess the name of the special house, which no one but its students knows. But you have some guidelines that can serve as hints. First, you have to find out who founded which house. Here are some statements. Every house was founded by a brother and a sister. Corona and Regula found Rymeth and Madlo, but not necessarily in this order. Ingram and Ardumo founded Madlo and Damora, but not necessarily in this order. Agnard and Regala founded the same house. Now, after you figure it out, the next step is to guess the name of the secret house. To find it out, find what all siblings have in common. So, are you gifted enough to get sorted into that special house? First, you have to find out who founded which house. So, the pair is always a brother and sister. Let's look at conditions 2 and 3. Each of them mention Madlo. Both Corona and Regala are sisters, which means that no matter who founded Madlo, it already has a sister founder. Therefore, Ingram, who is also a witch, couldn't have founded this house, which means that Madlo was founded by Ardumo, so Ingram founded Damora. Agnard founded the same house with Regala, so it was Modnor who founded Damora with Ingram. Therefore, it only leaves us with Rymeth for Agnar and Regala. Finally, Corona founded Madlo. Okay, great. Now we have to figure out the name of the 5th house. What do the siblings have in common? Of course, all of them have the letter R in their names. Let's put them in the order of appearance of the letter in their names, starting with Regala. Under each of their names, let's put the name of the house they founded. Now, the respective letters under each R form the name Radota. That's the name of their missing sister, and that's what the 4th house is called. So, pal, if you figured it out, congratulations, and welcome home.
You need to take 2 apples from your garden and bring them to your friend, but she lives on the other bank of the river. To get to her house, you need to cross a bridge. It can hold your weight and the weight of 1 apple. If you try to step on the bridge with 2 apples, it'll collapse into the water, which is swarming with piranhas. What can you do to bring your friend 2 apples if you can only make 1 trip? You should cross the bridge while juggling the apples. A billionaire's wife called the police at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. She said she just found her husband unconscious in his study. A baseball bat was lying next to him on the floor. The police questioned everyone who lived in the house. The wife said she had been away, buying her husband a present for their 10th wedding anniversary. The driver said he had left the evening before. He went to his parents' house because they needed some help. And the cook said he'd been preparing breakfast since 6 a.m. and hadn't left the kitchen. Who's lying? The wife. Stores aren't likely to be open so early on Sunday morning. Olivia was visiting her friend Ava, who lived in another city. In Ava's house, there was one room that was always locked, and Olivia wasn't allowed to enter that room. But she knew Ava kept the key for that room in her desk drawer. And one day, while her friend was away, Olivia took the key and unlocked the room. It was dark inside, so Olivia switched on the light. In the middle of the room, there was a table with a book lying on it. Suddenly, Olivia heard the front door open. She quickly switched off the light, locked the room, put the key back into the drawer, and pretended to be watching TV. Sometime later, Ava came up to her and asked, "Why did you enter the room that I asked you not to enter?" How did she understand Olivia had been to the room? Ava touched the light bulb, and it was hot. A glass jar is standing on the table so that a part of it is in the air. In half an hour, the jar will fall to the floor. Why? What's inside the jar? Inside the jar, there's some ice, but its weight is distributed in such a way that the jar is balanced. Once the ice melts and turns into water, the jar will fall. Susan worked in a clothing store that sold expensive designer items. One day, she discovered that someone had stolen a pair of pants. Look at the people who were inside at that time. Try to figure out who the thief is. It's the guy on the right. If you look attentively at his legs, you'll see the pants peeping out from under his jeans. Stephen had a storeroom in his house. It got locked with a special padlock which could be closed without a key. But to open it, Stephen had to use one. The only person who had the key was Stephen. There were no duplicates. The man locked the door carefully every evening. But one day, a golden brooch was found lying in the middle of his storeroom. It had been stolen from a museum the day before. The police suspected that Stephen was the thief because no one else had the key to the storeroom, and the man lived alone. Stephen knew for sure he was innocent, but then, how did the brooch appear in the room? Stephen was obviously framed. While he was in the storeroom, the real criminal changed the padlock. Stephen didn't need the key to lock it. That's why he didn't realize the padlock had been changed. Later, the thief opened the lock with his own key and left the brooch inside the room. Uh-oh, something's gone terribly wrong here. Can you solve this case and figure out which food is poisonous? If you ask me, all these dishes look questionable. I mean, look at them. Spiders, strange green fumes, roaches. But the dish that caused food poisoning is actually these French fries. See those flies around the plate? They don't seem to be alive. That green sauce on top of the fries must be the poison. Now, I have a tricky question for you. When are 1,893 and 2,548 smaller than 498? When they are years BCE. Detective Michael Brown went missing while investigating a tricky case. His friend, Detective Williams, found out that one of their colleagues was behind his disappearance. Williams visited Brown's home, and his friend's wife gave him a note. "Michael told me to give it to you if something happened to him." In the note, there were 4 numbers: 2, 8, 6, 7. Williams started to question his colleagues. "I've been away visiting my parents," said Tess. Jack said, "I haven't seen Brown for a couple of days." And Nora replied, "I'm just a trainee. Detective Brown gave me a task and I was busy with it." Williams thought for a while, looked at the note again, and understood who was guilty. Have you figured it out too? It was Tess. 2, 8, 6, 7. The first letters of these numbers make up her name. A treasure hunter got lost in a forest, but after he had been walking for some time, he noticed a crossroad with a big stone in the middle. There was a note on this stone which read, 4 plus NO 5. The man realized that the sign showed the direction to the treasure, but it was written in some tricky cipher. Can you help the treasure hunter to decipher the code? The man should turn the note upside down. Then it will read south. That's where the treasure is. When Elizabeth was 2 years old, her sister was twice her age. Now, Elizabeth is 18. How old is her sister? Her sister is 20 now. Let's have some fun with a few non-standard riddles. Who is bigger? Mr. Bigger, Mrs. Bigger, or their baby daughter? Their daughter, because she's a little bigger. Neat, right? Why do birds fly south in the winter? Flying is much better than walking. What do you get after you crossbreed a radio and a fridge? Some seriously cool music. Why does a math book look so unhappy? Its problems are rarely solved. What is the easiest way to double your money? The only easy way to do it is to put your money in front of a mirror. Let's get back on a more serious detective track. Kevin woke up in a hospital. He only remembers his name and nothing else. A doctor came in to check on the guy. He said 3 young women were waiting to see Kevin. The women came in. Strangely, each of them claimed she was the guy's sister. Only one of them was telling the truth. Who is it? It's the one in the middle. She has a birthmark on her hand, and Kevin has a similar one. Megan invited her friends to a restaurant to celebrate her birthday. They had a lot of fun. Megan got the best birthday present ever. Her friends gave her a ring with a large diamond. But suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. After several minutes, the lights came back on, but Megan's ring was gone. Look at the image attentively and try to figure out who stole it. It's the waiter. Look at the glass he's holding. He put the ring inside. Now there's much more water in it than before the power went out. Jacob's girlfriend, Nicole, loved riddles. One day, she was on a business trip to France. She called Jacob and told him it was her relative's birthday. "Could you go and congratulate my family member, please?" When the guy asked her which relative he had to visit, Nicole answered, "It's the daughter of the only son of my grandfather." Who is this mysterious relative Jacob was asked to congratulate? It's Nicole's sister.